Okay, it's 2 o'clock, so I think I better get underway. I'd just like to welcome everybody to the Health and Wellbeing Board for Thurrock. Does everyone know each other? Is everyone new here for the first time? We'll go around anyway, okay. So if I start off with myself, I'm Mark Hooper, and I chair the Health and Wellbeing Board and portfolio holder for Health and Wellbeing for Thurrock Council.
Hello everyone, I'm Sharon Stoltz. I'm the Interim Director of Public Health for Thurrock.
Good afternoon everyone, Margaret Allen, Deputy Alliance Director for Thurrock in the ICB.
Hi there, Mark Tebbs. I'm the Chief Exec of Thurrock CVS, and also here to say that Kim James from Thurrock Health Watch sends her apologies.
Hello there, I'm Dr. William Bird. I'm a GP and Chair of Active Essex.
Good afternoon everyone, my name is Jason Fergus, I'm the Director of Active Essex.
Good afternoon everyone, Juliet Raisin, Relationship Manager for Active Essex.
Afternoon everybody, I'm Helen Horrocks, Head of Public Health for Thurrock Council.
Afternoon everyone, Kerry Armstrong, I'm Head of Adult Social Care, Commissioning and Transformation.
Hello, I'm Lizzie Rigby, Ward Councillor for Stifford Clays and Shadow Portfolio Holder for Health and Wellbeing.
Good afternoon everyone, I'm Gloria Godaro, I'm the Chief Officer for Housing, Regeneration and Economic Development.
Afternoon, Michael Deneen. I am the Assistant Director for Community Safety and Enforcement.
Afternoon everyone, I'm Councillor Vicky Hartstein and I am the Cabinet Member for Children's Services and Education. Good afternoon everyone.
I'm John Kent, Leader of the Council.
Afternoon everyone, Rob Percy, Interim Executive Director, Adults and Health.
So welcome everybody. Have we got any apologies today, apart from Kim? Have you received any? No. Thank you. Right, just a bit of housekeeping then. This is an in-person meeting. The meeting is being live streamed, so I just ask you to make sure you stay seated in the seats you're in because obviously your name on the live stream will come up as you speak. So if you change, if I swap with Sharon, she will look a very odd Mark Hooper. So I just ask you to stay where you are. Right. So just remind you to turn your mics off and on. When you're speaking and not speaking. There are no planned fire tests today, so if the fire alarms go off, we'll be asked to evacuate it and you'll be escorted out of the building by officers and security. Right, so move on to agenda item 2, minutes of November's meeting. They are on page 5 of the papers you should have in front of you. Are there any other meetings approved from the last meeting in November? Yes, Margaret, are you happy with that? Anyone else? Second that? Okay, thank you, Gloria. Okay, so I'll move on to item 3 unless there's any matters arising that people want to raise from the last meeting. Okay, so item 4, are there any declarations of interest? Right, item 5, I haven't considered any urgent items for consideration for today's meeting. Item 6, integrated commissioning, so I'll ask Kerry if she'd be kind enough to present that. We have 25 minutes for this item. We use a flag system in this meeting, so about 2 minutes beforehand, someone will wave at you just to say you've got 2 minutes to go. We try and keep to the agenda time. We find that actually works more efficiently. So that in mind, I'll ask over to you, Kerry.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to present the strategy to the board today. And I'll just give a brief summary because you've got the papers, and obviously leave room for kind of questions afterwards to keep within 25 minutes. I think the first thing to say is that public sector commissioning tends to have been quite time and task in approach. It's kind of the contracts and the specifications we use and the way we commission assumes that people kind of are linear and actually assumes that they have the same service day in, day out for the entire kind of length of the contract. Domiciliary care is a real example of this. We need to have a change in approach to our integrated commissioning approach that recognise that people are complex and that kind of worked around people in a more flexible way to deliver the outcomes in the way they wanted them. In terms of the strategy you've got in front of you, this is a direct or one of the products of our integrated care strategy that I know has come to the board in the past. And chapter 10 of that strategy, I'm sure you remember it well, chapter 10 of that strategy talks about commissioning, strategic commissioning across health and social care. And this strategy just takes that and kind of identifies how that's going to be delivered in a lot more detail. So the kind of strategy you have in front of you just sets out what that looks like if we're to actually achieve success. In terms of what that looks like then, paragraph 2.4 talks about some of the things that we need to do differently to change the way that we commission. So it is flexible and it does recognise complexity, rather than actually sending people to different services when actually they need just one solution that wraps around them. So just I won't read it all out because you've got it, but just a couple of the things just to point out is around recognising the variety of individuals and complexity. No one person will have the same requirements or the same outcomes, and we need kind of contracts and commissioning strategies and commissioning approaches that develop that. We need to kind of have a new relationship with providers. So traditionally, it's been very much a contract management type approach. The way that we're working now is around building partnership working and expecting providers or working with providers so they can actually work as kind of trusted partners and actually look at how they can learn throughout the life of the contract. And I'll talk about that in a bit more detail, as opposed to saying to them that we want the same things delivered kind of year in, year out, and giving them no flexibility to kind of depart from that specification. So as part of kind of, changing our approach, some of that is around kind of how we kind of build a learning approach into commissioning. So we'll talk about commissioning for learning. So literally our kind of contracts when we go out now will be a lot less specific, and they'll talk about how we can move throughout the life of the contract, working with providers to actually deliver and change services and solutions that reflect what people want rather than just sticking with them regardless. So in terms of kind of just moving on, In terms of the strategy, we kind of the range is from right from well-being and prevention all the way up into kind of our kind of specialist accommodation. So it would look at kind of how we prevent, so through public health in particular, right the way through to, for example, residential care type services. There are a number of different delivery plans that are being developed underneath the strategy that look at separate cohorts. So, for example, autism is one that's in development. We've already kind of developed an approach around older people. We've developed an approach around residential care, which kind of is around delivering a very different type of facility for older people that need that. And we've also developed a specialist accommodation strategy, which again is based on delivering something that is far more flexible, a model, and looks at how we can learn and do differently through the life of contracts. This means that rather than actually having just specific services or specific providers, it also means actually having alliance type approaches where we might actually contract across a range of providers, or it might be contracting across a range of functions as well, as opposed to just, for example, adult social care or just domiciliary care. People, as I say, it goes back to actually recognising what people want and need, and how commissioning can develop to actually respond to that and respond to delivering outcomes in the best way. It's also the most effective way of how we can use resource, I think, as well. In terms of kind of just additional points to be made, I say all of the different strategies are being developed at the moment, some already in train, some being developed. They will all be done in a way that's kind of alongside co-production. So our user-led coalition is currently co-producing our autism strategy. And all of the strategies we've produced so far have been done alongside people with lived experience and carers. We also include and involve people with lived experience in the commissioning process as well. So people are kind of involved throughout the approach. And I think the flexibility that we're building with the commissioning strategy also allows that actually we can develop, if needs change throughout the life of the contract, we can develop kind of what we do differently rather than waiting until that contract is at an end. Just one of the examples, just I suppose to demonstrate what we're doing differently, is our domiciliary care strategy. In the past, we would have gone out and kind of just commissioned around a set number of hours with kind of providers that would kind of go in and out and do the same thing day in, day out for the life of the contract. For the contract we've got, which starts in April, the specification, to say, was very much a looser specification based on commissioning for learning. Obviously, we want people to undertake certain tasks in certain time, but actually it's around what we've commissioned is that those providers need to work with individuals to actually find out what they want and to develop practices that enable them to deliver something very differently and that moves away from time and task. That's meant kind of having longer contract periods to ensure that the providers we've got can invest in staff. We think that that will also recruit or help with recruitment for and help with the marketplace and stir up the marketplace. And also it will kind of provide some career development opportunities for kind of staff as well. So, for example, some of the things that our providers will be doing will be experimenting around blended roles, where actually they deliver both health and social care type functions, and also trusted assessor type approaches as well, where if a carer is going into someone's property, they might do kind of 2 or 3 other things whilst they're there at the same time to reduce the number of professionals, for example, that are going in and out of that house. The providers that we've chosen all gave compelling arguments as to why they should be chosen and why they wanted to actually be involved in that work. So we're really excited to work with them to actually test how this approach is going to work. And this is what we're going to be doing for all kind of contracts going forward, where it makes sense to do so. In terms of just a few kind of more details, governance will be through our Integrated Commissioning Executive, which is where our Better Care Fund is also governed. The Better Care Fund includes most of or all of the resource that we use for commissioning activity. And there's a review going on of the Better Care Fund at the moment, which will identify some opportunities for decommissioning and recommissioning, whereby we can again make this shift that's reflected in the strategy. The other opportunities, I suppose, that are left for us are we're at quite a starting point in terms of integrated commissioning. So we're changing our approach within adult social care. I know that others will be doing the same in terms of other partners, but we now need to actually look to each other to identify how we can develop commissioning approaches that span whether it's parts of health, public health, housing, mental health, you know, whatever makes sense, we need to think about how we actually take forward truly integrated approaches. So that's work that will be carried forwards. I think I've probably kind of said enough and probably gone all over the place, but really you've got the papers, so it's just really whether there are any questions and hopefully endorse the strategy as a beginning for that work.
Right, thank you for that. I have a couple of points, but maybe I'll ask members if they've got any questions. Margaret?
Thank you. Yes, it's not actually a question. I just wanted to give a little footnote to Kerry's really good description of the integrated commissioning strategy. NHSE and the Department for Health and Social Care in April are going to issue a strategic commissioning framework, and there is quite a lot of focus on how ICBs and alliances within ICBs can work not just with providers and the community and voluntary sector, but how this might impact and be impacted by local authorities and the devolution bill. So, and I'm going to send it over to Kerry so she can have a look at it.
Thank you. Councillor Kent?
Yeah, I think there's some really good stuff in here. I think it sets just the right framework, just the sort of thing we should be looking at. I'm just interested that Kerry was talking about using this in part as a way of shoring up the marketplace, was I think the phrase that Kerry used. Now, we all know that the market is incredibly fragile at the moment. I'd just like a bit of confidence that we believe that this can be delivered. I'd like some comfort on that before I would move to endorse it.
I think we can be as confident as it's possible to be. The market is very, very fragile. We always consult with the market before we actually enter into anything, and actually it was seen, and this was received, particularly the domiciliary care exercise, and as we know, that's our biggest contract to date. The providers we've got were very positive about the changes we've made. The whole purpose of having a longer contract period was to give them greater kind of confidence of investment over a longer period of time, which also helps them give confidence to staff and reduces turnover. And I think obviously in terms of the changes we're making over the life of the contract, the fact we're going to be working in partnership, I think gives them as much confidence as they can say. I mean, obviously there are always going to be yearly kind of conversations about uplifts, etc. And we know that there are kind of challenges. But I think obviously if we're carrying on with that engagement with providers, which is kind of one of the reasons we're doing it as well, we hope to be as confident, but it's still going to be vulnerable, the marketplace. I think there's no getting away from that.
And if I could just add to Kerry's point, just before Christmas I went out and met with two of the new providers of the home care contract, and speaking to them and the staff who will be delivering, they're really excited by the opportunity to work in this contract. So they were saying that they see career development opportunities for them. They see different ways of being able to work in a way that promotes the independence of the individuals more by having this stronger focus on outcomes. So I think it would be an encouragement to the market to be able to recruit into this type of service. And the second point I'd make, one of the things I've been really taken by since I'm coming here is these micro enterprises. So the idea that we can really commission at a real social value in the local, the local market and local providers, and I think those micro enterprises are playing a really important role. And so I think it's not just about who we commission; it's about the fact they're locally based as well. So we can kind of keep the money within the local economy, and the whole cycle works better.
Gloria.
Thank you, Chair. I think from the transitioning, if you like, from staff working, we all know that social workers, as they do now, it's very, the pressure there on having to meet demand to an integrated, blended role. I guess my observation would be about just making sure whoever is leading on a contract, there's capacity so that there's not, in terms of health and well-being, that staff don't become under pressure, because there will be times when that delivery service will come under pressure, and therefore that capacity is there so that staff who are actually delivering the work have actually, their mental health and well-being taken into account. And sometimes it isn't. I see this in almost like in the school environment, for example, where, I don't know, a school nurse is being asked to look after 100 schools, or, slightly exaggeration there, but you can see in terms of it becomes disproportionate. So just making sure that whoever's delivering that contract, that they've got the capacity to be able to deliver.
It should lead to a lot more creative thinking about how we deliver services. How are you going to monitor that?
I mean, we already monitor, obviously, quality very closely through our contracts and brokerage, but this is a new approach. So I think, we've already had kind of 2 or 3 meetings with our new domiciliary care providers, for example, and I think, those meetings already, people are, providers have put themselves forward for pilots and for experiments. And I think in terms of commissioning for learning, I think we also need to kind of monitor for learning as well. So obviously, no one's saying we're going to move away from actually monitoring quality and ensuring that kind of providers are delivering what they need to deliver in terms of the quality side of things. But I think we'll expect to see some kind of some monitoring arrangements that are more around what have providers learnt, what are they doing with that learning, and how is that then delivering better outcomes for individuals as a result. So, and we can do that in a number of ways, and I suspect that we'll kind of actually have to pilot some of those techniques in terms of how we learn. So you can do that by obviously looking at satisfaction, how people kind of view their well-being, how things in providers like staff turnover, staff satisfaction. So I suspect that what we're going to have to do in discussion with providers is actually talk about what are the ways in which what does good and what does success look like, and then what are the ways in which we'll be able to actually monitor that, which will be, I think, again, the good thing about this is it's not just going to be the traditional key performance indicators. It will be performance around kind of what have we learned and what have we done with that and to what effect.
Okay, and you talked about the governance around that. In terms of data, because care is very data-led, is how can we demonstrate that in the way we're going forward? So, like, well, I guess my suggestion is, can we collect some data to come back here in a year's time to actually say, this has actually worked, because it's a 2-year strategy, 24 to 26, and a kind of like half-year point this time next year. Is that possible?
Yeah, I think there'll be a few things we can do. We can kind of do a few things to say where we're at with the delivery, where we have actually delivered a different approach, what that's led to, and maybe it might be an idea also to bring one of our providers back to say how they're experiencing difference. We did a presentation to ADAS. It was kind of a different organisation last week, and that was all around our different approach. And we took one of our new providers, with us, just to explain what it would look like to them. So actually bringing some providers with us to say what they're delivering, how they're delivering it differently, might also be useful if the board found that useful.
I mean, I know a lot of providers talk about person-centred approaches, but how they evidence that is sometimes hit and miss. So this approach will actually evidence that far better. Have you got any views, Mark?
I guess, well, I generally kind of really welcome it. I think the kind of principles are, a real breath of fresh air. I think it feels like it's a much more mature kind of way of working. I think providers, in the voluntary sector, all sectors are there to do a good job, and this kind of feels like it's really harnessing their skills and, kind of treating having a much more equal power balance. So I guess I kind of, I really welcome the approach and the principles that underlie it. I guess my questions are some of the things that have already been mentioned. So I think it's a much more resource-intensive way of working, so from both sides, so kind of that investment of time and energy to really, understand service delivery, understand the difficulties of delivering services. I think it really requires making sure that both sides have got the resources and the skills to be able to kind of work in that new way. So I'd be interested to know what, whether there's a kind of like a training program, how the council is kind of like managing that kind of upskilling of kind of staff to kind of work in that way. And I guess from the strategy side, there's a lot there about the kind of needs of the community, but I guess there's less detail around the current capacity, and I guess a lot of what we hear from the sector is just the waiting time. So just whether, how the strategy is going to address that kind of capacity and waiting time issues.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Are there any other questions? No? So if it's okay with everyone, can I move to the recommendation? It is recommended that the board members endorse Thurrock's integrated commissioning strategy. Is that agreed? Agreed? Thank you. Thank you, Kerry, for your very good report and your presentation, so thank you. Right, if I can please move on to item 7, Sports England's place expansion. We have 25 minutes for this item. The report is on page 61 of today's papers. So I think we have about 10 minutes for the presentation and about 15 minutes for questions and answers. I'm not quite sure who's presenting, so...
Hi, thank you very much, Councillor Hooper. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jason Fergus. Pleasure to be here this afternoon. And I suppose I'll start by just saying that a little bit about Active Essex, and I hope that everyone's had the opportunity to read the paper, but with a bit of context that Active Essex are the sport and physical activity partnership that work across Essex, Southend and Thurrock. And we're delighted that we've been having a very close relationship with Sport England over the years, and this opportunity that we're presenting to you this afternoon allows us to really think about how we hardwire sport and physical activity across this great place in Thurrock. And I say great place because I'm a resident as well, so absolutely a warm interest here to want to make sure that we can get this right for the great residents and the people that live here in Thurrock. I'm delighted this afternoon to be joined by a plethora of colleagues with me. Firstly, Helen and Juliet. Helen from the Public Health team and Juliet from Active Essex have been doing a huge amount of work. And I suppose just to extend that also to Mark and the Thurrock CVS, who have been absolutely critical in the journey thus far that we've been on around, my favourite word now, hardwiring physical activity and sport into this very important system here across Thurrock. What I'd like to do before I bring the paper to life with some salient points is just reintroduce actually, our chairman here at Active Essex, Dr. William Bird. And I've asked William just to kind of share in his role, very much so as a nationally recognised GP champion here around physical activity across England, just about why physical activity in sports is so important to systems and places and the benefits that we think this will absolutely bring to Thurrock residents here. So William, if you don't mind.
Thanks very much, Jason, and yes, thank you for having us. And this is a subject which I'm very passionate about, so it's always very easy for me to talk about physical activity and the importance of it. I am a GP, so it's been very important for me as a career for the last 35 years of making sure physical activity is there for my patients. But working with Active Essex, we sit in a much wider whole community, whole place-based work, which embeds physical activity into the system, and as Jason just said, hardwiring it. Just to kind of point out children's inactivity. So in Essex as a whole, neighbours, it's 26%. Here in Thurrock, it's 42%. So it is a lot higher. And same with adult inactivity. So in Thurrock, it's 34%. I'm just comparing with Essex as well, it's 25%. So we have to deal with what is a problem here. And it's very easy in the old days just to go out and just say, well, we need more leisure centres, we need more activities, we need more swimming pools perhaps. And we now know that that's completely the wrong way of addressing it. Most activity is the spontaneous activity that takes place around your house, around the streets, of course in community groups as well. So I'm just going to quickly look at the 4 themes that we're going to be mentioning a little bit later and just explain perhaps a bit some of the science and the gravitas of why physical activity is so important. If we look at active environments to start with, people have to feel just 3 things, and this is for the neuroscience. It's just, you've got to feel safe, you've got to feel valued, and you've got to feel you belong. And if you have those 3 things in a part of the community, you will go out and you'll want to go to the park, you'll want to go down to those streets. But if you don't feel safe, if you don't feel valued, if you don't feel you belong, you will want to stay in and hunker down, and perhaps with your children as well, stop them going out because it's an unsafe place. So the very first thing we have to do if we're going to increase physical activity is to make the places around where people live safer and feel that they belong there, they feel they're valued. It's not just about kind of crime, lack of crime, it's about a perception of a place that's so important. And one of the questions that's really good is this a good place for your children? And there's huge discrepancy between various wards that we can find. The second thing is about children and young people, and this is really a passion because we now know that children who are not active, it actually shapes the brain for the rest of their life. And the worry now is that we have children who are becoming anxious, and it's probably not surprising because an inactive child will have a larger amygdala, which does the fear part, and a smaller hippocampus, which is the part that reasons and creates, regulates their what's called the adrenaline and noradrenaline and all the stress. So if you've got a child that's indoors all the time, they will become an adult who will become more anxious, more worried, and less able to cope with things. Their intelligence changes as well. And the first bit of research came out at the end of last year showing what people had suspected for some time, that children who were inactive, taking all the accountability, were less intelligent, which is a harsh and hard thing to say, but that research has come out from a worldwide study. So for children, that's our future, and we have to make them obviously more active, but also the sport part helps them train to be able to cope with loss, defeat, gives them resilience, gives them power to be self-autonomy, it gives them a discipline, it gives them so many factors which are around the kind of the child itself as they grow up. And it gives them hope. In some children who don't have that hope, sport can be the way out, and so can activity. For communities, I've always said, and when you look at communities where inactivity is prevalent, that it's a dying community because you don't get people talking to each other, you don't get people volunteering, you don't get people caring for each other. People are indoors, don't know who's the neighbours, and that society will slowly fragment. So it's a bit of both. If you get a much more connected community, you'll get physical activity. If you put physical activity into the system, you'll get a more connected community. So it's a sort of two-way street that we have to do. But we know for health that the connection to other people is the single most important thing for a healthy and happy life. It's more important than smoking. It's more important than obesity. It's more important than any other factor. And research time and time again around the world showing how social connections is the key. And physical activity is the way we can do that. And also we get physical activity out of it. And then finally the health benefits and the social care. I don't need to remind you that physical activity is good for us. We know it prevents many, many conditions, including cancers, diabetes, and mental health problems. And it does this through really changing the whole body. It becomes a very different body when it's active compared to not. But the key to this is in older age. So as we become older, the frailty, the falls, the problems of social care start to mount up, and physical activity is obviously the one way that we can avoid all that aging process, which is not natural. We should not be, we think of it because the last 50 to 100 years, aging has been associated with many diseases. It used not to be, because we used to be able to keep active most of the time. So we can get back, and we need to keep that activity level all the way through the life course, from cradle to grave, all the way through, to prevent that frailty, to prevent that isolation. So that's really just a kind of summary to take things of the importance of it, and I'll hand back to Jason.
Thanks very much, William, and thank you for the slide. So I just wanted to pull out very quickly, Chairman, a couple of salient points in the paper to kind of canter us towards a discussion, if that's okay. I suppose the first point was that actually, next slide please, that we're really privileged that Sport England have recognised that actually place-based working and actually the approach to hardwire physical activity in sport is so important. And so late last year, they announced 80 places that they wanted to work with in this place-based approach way, and delighted that Thurrock was one of those places. But it's really important just to share with you actually what Sport England are looking for in the investment and the work they're looking to do in each of these places. And they're very much, of course, as William just described, decreasing in activity, increasing activity, tackling inequalities, and particularly that last point around providing positive experiences, as William described, around children and young people, which is absolutely so key. But actually for us, we absolutely want the opportunity to be able to understand and better connect the system. So the conversation, the paper that Kerry just presented was absolutely ideal. It was like well timed because we absolutely see a real connection with social care and adults and how we use those new providers that may well be appointed to really position the work that we want to do around physical activity. And of course, that long-term sustainable change. So this is about long-term how we affect and change the ecosystem here in Thurrock absolutely for the better. Next slide, please. We then also touch on, and critically, about doing things differently. So actually taking a real whole system approach where we're really clear about a defined geography and the places that we're working in across Thurrock, but also understanding, as I said here, about that better connectivity. And I suppose moving away from, which is exactly what Kerry was describing, it's quite well timed in that we want to move away from this transactional relationships that we have with communities and partners to actually be relationship-based, where we're building that capability and capacity in the voluntary and community sector, working with Thurrock CVS and partners and the third sector, and really creating that long-term sustainability. But what we've been blessed with is the opportunities the paper describes, is to do a bit of test and learn. Test and learn, and you saw from the appendix in the pack, just some of the opportunities that we've been able to take place of, and really test and understand actually the ingredients here that we're going to need to pull together well. And clearly ensuring that we create that common purpose that we've all got that shared accountability, that actually we're all aiming towards the same thing to make a difference to the health and well-being of people's lives here in Thurrock, but also contributing to the 6 domains that clearly the health and well-being board have got, which we absolutely recognise can add value to. Finally for me, Chairman, next slide please, is that we absolutely reference in our paper that we've identified 4, as Dr. William Burgess said, emerging themes that we've identified that we want to pursue further in shaping the full submission award to Sport England later next month into early March. They are, as you can see, active environments, children, young people, communities, and health and social care. And so this afternoon, Health and Wellbeing Board, we're asking for 2 recommendations for your support, please. Firstly, that you endorse and support us to proceed with a full award to Sport England to bring some investment in, but actually not just investment on its own, but how that levers other system alignment budget that we're doing here in Thurrock. And then secondly, your support and I suppose to critique and add value to what we've identified as the 4 key priorities. Have we got them right? Have we missed anything? Really keen to hear your views in that space as we move forward into the next steps. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'll go to questions. Rob?
Can I just say thank you very much for the presentation, and as you'd probably expect in my role, I fully support this in every way, shape or form, and so I think it's excellent. Helen did talk me through it a while ago, and I noticed you mentioned the presentation, but let's really emphasise that connection between physical well-being and mental well-being. And, you know, I think if we can get these behaviours into people in an early age, it will last through a lifetime. And it's got to be linked to other things such as dietary advice and etc. So my question is this, and I should know the answer. So Sharon or Helen will tell me that this is all in hand. It's about the profile of it. So it's about, you know, I think that we need to have an engagement strategy around this to really raise the profile that this is happening. And we can take that forward within the comms team. But I don't think it's just a comms thing for the council. I think it's actually working with the system across health, across the VCS, and really kind of take a system approach to kind of an engagement plan or promotion plan, which really raises awareness for young people, but also for adults and for families and for older people about the benefits. Actually, you've not missed the bus if you're old like me in your 60s, and there's still opportunities for you to get engaged and still have the benefits. So I would like to ask, have we started that engagement process, or is that something we need to pick up with our comms teams?
I can come back on that. We do have our communications team within the council engaged. We have a regular working group which they're invited to, and we have a plan to look at this specifically as a campaign over the coming year as well. One important thing to pick up is an early decision by the system leadership group was, the steering group was to call this work Find Your Active Thurrock as a kind of a brand and something that everybody could kind of get behind, and a more simple message to communicate. And it's already a well-established campaign locally and aligns to the Find Your Active branding as well across Essex, so that we get that amplification of messages as well. So ongoing but in progress.
Sharon?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of comments and then 2 questions, if I may. Obviously, I'm fully supportive of this. As Director of Public Health, I'm sponsoring this programme, so very much support it. And I think that you only need to understand some of the data to appreciate the importance of this. But I hadn't quite clocked that statistic of 34.4% of children in Thurrock not being active, and that over 40% not meeting the guidelines, recommended guidelines for physical activity, which really does link into the work that the Childhood Obesity Task and Finish group has been doing on behalf of People Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and we've looked at physical activity as part of that. So I think there are some links here. 2 questions then, if I may, Chair. The first of these is that the Chief Medical Officer, in a report a little while ago, made the point that the greatest health and well-being impacts are experienced by those people who are currently sedentary, who are not participating in any physical activity at all. So we get the greatest health and well-being impacts for a population by getting those individuals to be even a little bit active. So I suppose my first question is, how will this programme assist with that, targeting those individuals who currently are not engaged in any sort of physical activity? And my second question sort of picks up a little bit about what Rob said. So I think one of the challenges for us as a Health and Wellbeing Board and as a council, together with other partners, is the Place Expansion Programme is really focused on just 3 areas in Thurrock. So the additional investment is targeted to Chadwell, St Mary, Tilbury and South Ockendon. But we know that lack of physical activity or sedentary lifestyles, if you like, is a problem for the whole of Thurrock. So how do you think this programme is going to be able to help this Health and Wellbeing Board and all of the partners represented around the table today? How will this programme actually benefit everyone living in Thurrock, not just those 3 areas that this is going to be focused on? Thank you.
Thanks very much, and nice to see you, Sharon. Delighted to see you. I suppose the first point, your first question, very much around the sedentary behaviour and very much how we see that kind of change in behaviour. I think my next sentence is behaviour change, and a big part of what we've learned in the work that we've done is that how do we understand our audiences and taking an asset-based community development approach, which I know is very strong here in Thurrock, about not telling people what to do, but actually understanding and meeting them where they're at. And so we would very much take a behaviour change support, and certainly, Rob, Mr. Peacey, your point around campaign, I'd take that one step further actually, in a bit of a behaviour change campaign, very much about how we start to encourage people and not tell them, because the worst thing is I've got a doctor sitting next to me, and if he tells me to do something, the last thing you do is you actually then do it, do you? So there's something about how we behaviour change and use our community and our third sector partners as that nudge theory that we call actually. And sometimes it's really important, and the analogy that I use actually, when I see Mo Farah run a marathon, it's the last thing that's going to make me want to do it. But if I see someone like myself doing it, I feel much more related to be able to think, well, actually, if they can do it, I can do it. And there's something about how we use our comms and our messaging and our behaviour change, Sharon, to really ensure that we're reaching to the audiences that certainly we've identified through the insight and the work that we've particularly done as well. So I would absolutely say it's not a one-size-fits-all, and what you'll find is a various set of tools and suites that we would use according to who we're trying to target and the behaviour change approach that we want to take as well. And that's a simple answer, but there's much more depth that sits behind that as well. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything to that, or you're comfortable with my answer. Yeah.
I just wanted to go a step further, really, and I guess discuss that actually getting people active is more than putting on an exercise session or engaging in sports specifically. Those things are important, but it's also about how we encourage people to incorporate physical activity in their day-to-day lives. And so we need to think about things like active travel. We need to think about activating our neighbourhoods and our local spaces so that people feel comfortable, can go out and be active, how they wish to be active and feel comfortable in doing that as well. So just a further additional point around that as well.
And sorry, just to one more addition on that. So I think one of the things we've very much learned as we've gone on this journey is the local trusted organisations are absolutely key, and the key word of that is trust, the trusted organisations. And of course they'll be working across those boundaries, they'll be working outside those areas you've mentioned. But I think one of the things I think we've learned also, that those people who are the most inactive, completely sedentary, and as you absolutely rightly say, it's moving those people out of that inactivity to doing something gives you the best health benefits. A lot of them are in a situation where they don't have trust. They don't have trust in the wider world. So you have to build that trust before you even start to think about physical activity. And that takes time. So we may not see an immediate movement, even the first 6 months or even a year, because you're building trust, you're building relationships, you're building that community, and you're giving them the confidence to be able to actually move out from where they are. And I think what we've, the other thing we've learned, this takes time. And so it will be an ongoing, it won't be an immediate kind of blitz, there won't be a sort of sudden big run and everyone turns up. This will be those people who are invisible to much of the society, even to GPs they're invisible, but moving them out means that they slowly get that confidence and by building that trust.
And moving on to your second question, very quickly, Chairman, if that's okay, there was a second question, just very much around the areas that you identified that through the greatest need index that Sporting have identified the 4 or 5 places. I think what we found working in Basildon, in Colchester and in Tendering, and the work we're now doing in Harlow and Canvey, is something I'd like to call the ripple effect. Because actually the ecosystem, there's only one ecosystem, so we might be doing defined work in certain places, but what we're finding is that there's a real ripple effect of actually how we're making that change. And I dare say, actually, the way that we work, so the ways of working is very much about the legacy of what this work will do. So actually, even though we're working in defined places, we're going to get this consistency about how we work using the ABCD approach, using that behaviour change model and all those things that my colleagues have just referenced, I think. You'll see ripple effects, Sharon, across all of your geographical areas in the work that we're going to be doing.
Margaret?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a couple of comments, if I may. The Thurrock Alliance within the ICB has been working very closely on this, this new initiative and will remain so. The ICB and Thurrock Alliance fully support and endorse this new initiative, but underneath that, and in a very practical way, we are also working locally with the Sharon's Public Health team and Impulse Leisure to ensure that the exercise on referral scheme continues and is not impacted by any reduction in any funding, so that we can actually really start to make some inroads on a very practical level, but underneath that overarching strategy.
That's good news. Councillor Rigby?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that very vibrant and enthusiastic report from yourselves. It is definitely a very important topic, and one of the things we were talking about was the signposting and the comms. Will you be doing any talks or anything within schools? Because I think that schools do play a big role with childhood activity. So would that be something that you will be
I'm nodding profusely, absolutely, yes, without a shadow of a doubt. How we engage in not just our school sport partnership that kind of operates a school activity, but also actually thinking about some of the behaviour change, so something like the Daily Mile, for example, about how do we encourage those simple nudge opportunities that we might be able to encourage our schools to do. And Juliet might want to add to that from the work she's doing as relationship manager.
Yeah, I think the head teachers play a really important role for us to be able to access the school, access the students, and help that education process around physical activity. So yeah, we've absolutely got an ambition to make sure that we can engage with those students through their educational settings.
Thank you. And on another note, would it be possible to have information on that study you were referencing about the inactivity leading to a reduction in intelligence as well? That'd be great. Thank you. Thank you.
I was going to ask a similar question, really, because one of the things I was surprised at was the number of people inactive. Also, Thurrock has probably a very high number of schools or academies. Now, in the state sector, physical activity should be carried out about 2 hours a week, but in academies, there's no requirement to do so. So, are we doing much in terms of influencing academies, in terms of their curriculum, in terms of physical activities?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, short answer, yes. I think what we've found with academies is very much about how we use, and a bit of the science that actually Dr. Bird was just talking about, Chairman, actually is about how we see the mental and health benefits of young people being more physically active when they're coming to lessons and their whole general kind of behaviour. And there's real evidence that's shown that actually that if we can encourage our young people to be more active and using some of those touch points throughout the school day, there's been kind of huge benefit. So we've been trialling something called trauma prospective practice in Essex, and it's had a real impact on how young people's behaviours change, using sport and physical activity as part of that tool to encourage them as to how they might approach their everyday daily life. And of course, what we've also seen through the onset of COVID is we absolutely have seen actually the real, what we call kind of non-activity of young people actually through that period, and how do we now turn that dial. And I think that this is a real opportunity for us to turn that dial in many places across the county here in Essex, Thurrock and Southend, in really making that big long-term difference, Councillor.
Okay. Sharon?
I think this is a really important issue for us, and Councillor Rigby may want to expand on this, but certainly as part of the work of the Children's Obesity Task and Finish Group, that report will be presented to People Overview and Scrutiny Committee later this week. We did try and engage with schools, and we did try and engage with head teachers and with academies. And the message that came back very clearly was the challenge, I think, that schools have in managing to fit in opportunities for children to be physically active while covering the demands of the national curriculum, etc. And I think Councillor Hartstein will be very aware of this. The Council is very limited in the influence it has over academies in encouraging them to create opportunities for children to be more physically active. So we are leading some work at the moment within the public health team on a new healthy weight strategy. That strategy will be ready to come to the Health and Wellbeing Board for consultation in the spring. There's consultation and engagement happening right now, isn't there, Helen, to engage wider stakeholders in this. And so one of our priorities will absolutely be to think about how we can collectively, across the whole system, start to work with schools in a different way to be able to support them, to be able to create opportunities to help them to create opportunities for children to be more physically active, maybe outside of the school day, if that is what is needed. So it's very clearly being identified as a priority for us. It is an area that will be a priority in the new healthy weight strategy, and we know it's an area that we need to focus on going forward. But again, it's a whole system issue, and one that schools working individually is not going to be able to resolve, really. Thank you.
Councillor Rigby?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll just follow on from what Sharon was saying. We did struggle a bit with involving schools with our report. Primary schools, we got more feedback from, and they do seem that they are doing more with regards to physical activity and everything. And secondary schools, we had a very brief meeting with some sort of head teachers, and the feedback, as Sharon said, was that they just didn't have capacity within the timetable. They were prioritising academic lessons. So what I think we really need to work on is trying to say, well, actually, if you get more physical activity, that is going to improve academic performance, because where they're so focused on results, in fact, if they do get some more exercise in, they might actually improve their results. So I think we just need to find a way to get, you know, that message home with them. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think we all agree on that. It's just actually, is the education system really making rounded people? I guess that's a question I had, rather than people just academically focused. But okay, unless there's any, Rita.
Just in the same spirit as the system, there are obviously natural synergies and pathways back to health and care services, and also as employers of local staff as well. And role modelling is really important here. Building those relationships is key. So we really need to take maximum opportunities here with both our mental health services, community health services, and obviously everything you spoke about earlier. It's all about relationships and how we work in Thurrock in an integrated way. Because actually, once you actually talk to residents about what's important to them, and literally through this whole session, I've been thinking about, and Rob and I spoke earlier about sort of exercise and what it means to us. But actually, if I think about my mother in a sari and being embarrassed about actually putting trainers on and going for a walk in the street, so it's really about having those conversations about how can we make people feel confident, but actually working with those people that they trust and have built relationships with. And it might be the ideal opportunity to do this, but really need to out it as pathways.
Mark, and I really need to move on.
Just in a similar way, there's a lot of engagement happening in the arts and culture field, kind of Start Thurrock, and development of the kind of delivery of the cultural strategy. So is there sort of synergy between the kind of place expansion and the Start Thurrock work?
Yes, so absolutely there is synergy, both from a funding perspective, that it's quite localised. They've Start Thurrock have a similar geographical focus areas to us, so those conversations with the cultural side have already started, and absolutely we've got experience of this happening in other areas. So in Basildon, we've got experience of that really creating synergy, cross capacity, increasing in volunteering, not only in the cultural side, but also the physical activity side. So yeah, there's great synergies, I think, and opportunities for us to make sure that we're marrying up those conversations over the coming years.
Okay, if it's okay with everyone, I'd like to move on to the recommendation for members to approve the submission of the award proposed to, sorry, my hay fever's really kicked in since the air conditions come on, so I'm really struggling to breathe, so I apologise. I'll carry on. The submission of full award proposal to Sports England by Active Essex as the lead applicant for the place Partnership Programme in Thurrock. This will develop alongside the submitted with the endorsement of key system partners identified within the report. The identified thematic priority areas for increasing physical activities across the borough. I hope that sounded. Is that agreed? Thank you very much for your presentation and your report. It is really helpful. I think this work is really important, particularly when it comes to our young people. Thank you very much. Right. You can leave if you want to. That's perfectly fine. But you're welcome to stay as well. Okay. Item agenda, Adult Social Care Board Annual Report. Sorry. Adult Safeguarding Board Annual Report. We have 20 minutes for this item. So I think 15 minutes for presentation, 5 minutes for discussion, and if I can ask Jim to present the item.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon once again. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to come along and present this report, which is the annual report for 2023-24, which was the first year of our strategic plan. In the bundle, there are three elements to my report. First is the covering report. Secondly, the annual report itself. And then thirdly, more for reference than anything else, the actual three-year strategy. With your permission, Chair, I plan to speak mostly to the annual report at some speed, really, and invite questions or comments on the work of the board subsequently. The covering report sets out what the three statutory obligations of a board are, of a Safeguarding Adult Board, as contained in the Care Act of 2014, which is to produce an annual report, to produce a strategic report, and to conduct safeguarding adult reviews. These are reviews when there's been a death or serious injury to somebody in care or in need of care, which it's felt could have been avoided, and they're lessons learned processes rather than fault, guilt attribution. It's clear that we are complying with all three elements of that clearly. We've got the annual report in front of you, as is the strategy, and both make references to the safeguarding adult reviews that I've just been talking to. So I was going to ask if we could move through to the actual annual report itself, and the first couple of pages on that, I'm looking at pages 102 onwards, really, which give the background, like the constitution of the board who attends it, and the way in which it actually operates, who it works with. And so if we come to page 106, to the first bit of data, this is very significant. This is the sort of data that we've been working with up until this year, which is bluntly pretty basic, and the extent to which it drives activity for us is limited, to say the least. I'll be able to talk about the changes that have been taking place since. Just specifically, though, if we look at the numbers of concerns and inquiries, the actual number of concerns has increased in the reported year on the previous year by just over 14%, and the number of inquiries has decreased by 13%, which may sound like bad news, but in fact, we obviously want to have as many concerns reported as possible, so we see that as a positive, and the quality of the inquiries and the scrutiny of those inquiries, it follows from that. What I mean by that is that there's a more sophisticated process on evaluating these concerns before instituting the Section 42 inquiries. I also should say that when there are cases that don't meet the criteria for an inquiry, there is then a review of that case, and there's a spot check or audit of those cases to make sure that they are right decisions being made. I'm pleased with this point. On page 107, we've struggled sometimes to make sure that those people who are seeking seeking safeguarding actually have their outcomes identified. And this is a figure that has been disappointing, I think, in the past. It's got better, and it's even better than reported here, where it says only 84% of adults were actually asked what they wanted to have happen. That's increased significantly. What is positive, though, is of those that were asked, 97% felt that the outcomes they expressed that they wanted were actually achieved. And so we move on. The board challenge and impact, this details the sorts of areas where we have been working through the last couple of years. And then we come on page 109 to the 6 strategic priorities that form the basis of the strategic plan. The way that this is going is to ensure that the strategy actually drives activity, which is the whole point of it. What we have is each of these 6 priorities will have an identified lead, and there will be a team of people who are working in addition to the other work to deliver against that. And the progress against delivery is monitored both at board meetings and obviously in between those meetings. And again, the detail is before you in page 109 onwards of the 6 priorities, which sets out what has been achieved in the first year and what's been planned for the second year. And again, I wasn't going to say too much about these because I think it's pretty self-evident. There has been good progress on all 6. I think that's a fair point to make. Some more than others, I think it's right to say. And some issues have arisen which have been addressed. I'm particularly pleased to say that we're looking to set up a joint conference with the Safeguarding Children's Partnership, but I was a bit concerned to note that the date we've got lined up is the 2nd of April in Orsett Hall, which of course clashes with what's possibly another meeting of this group, but I think that might be something to be reviewed, I don't know. On page 110, the second priority is about developing awareness amongst adults, and there's 2 elements to this I'd like to draw attention to. The first is the website, which I would be very keen if you could have a look at that. I think it's excellent, but then perhaps I would say that, wouldn't I? I'd be grateful for any feedback on that. But the second is that we've taken the decision to employ on 1 day a week of the time of an engagement officer. And this is a person who goes around, and it may sound old school, but they hand out leaflets, they give brochures to key community places, detailing the pathways to access safeguarding. And one of the principal reasons for that is not everybody accesses websites, and many of the people who we definitely do want to have contact us will certainly not be able to do that. So we see this as a way to perhaps close that gap a little anyway. And then the rest of the priorities are as before you. And I think rather than me pick these one at a time, if there are areas of interest that members have, perhaps we could do it that way. The 6 priorities are covered. I think there's then information about the financial situation of the board. We receive ring-fenced money from all 3 core partners. That's the council, the ICB, and Police and Fire Crime Commissioner. And you see that we've got a significant underspend. That's largely due to the curtailment of activities we had planned spending for due to COVID. So that's all, we're looking to move forward from that. And the last element of this report are the contributions by the key staff members from those 3 agencies. So we have the Assistant Director, Les Billion, with his then police, and then from the ICB. And that is then followed by the strategic plan itself. But again, that has been to this board before, so I wasn't going to refer further to that plan. But Chair, I'm sorry if I've gone through that rather too fast, but I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, James. Any questions? Councillor Kent.
Yeah, thanks for the report, Jim. Always informative. Just 2 points for me. On the table of concerns, and this is just me being dim, there are 2 concerns against a heading which is organisational. Could you just give us an example of what that might mean? Because I don't kind of quite understand it. And Second, you're looking for some assurance around modern slavery, with two concerns about modern slavery kind of reported through the year. Do you think that's kind of underreported, or do you think it's a fair reflection? One 106. In the table of concerns that tell us that most concerns are around neglect, there's a heading there which is organisational, and I just couldn't quite work it out.
Thank you, Councillor. Sharon?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Really enjoyed reading it. It's presented in a style that actually comes across very well. So thank you for the report. Two questions, if I may. One is, in other places that I've worked as Director of Public Health, the DPH has actually been a member of the Safeguarding Adults Board. I don't think that's the case in Thurrock, so just a question really as Chair, would you consider inviting the Director of Public Health to become a member of the board? And then my second question, you probably can't answer, perhaps it's something that needs to be followed up, but on page 127 in our papers, there were recommendations listed there from a thematic safeguarding adult review. I wasn't able to access the report on the link, but recommendation 5 is that the COVID section of the review is considered with regard to pandemic planning. So Public Health is currently starting a programme of work with the UK Health Security Agency to review our outbreak management plan in Thurrock. So it would be good if someone, I don't know whether Rob, someone in adult social care might be able to facilitate this. It would be really helpful to have a copy of that thematic safeguarding adult review, so that any issues that were picked up in that review related to pandemic planning, we can make sure are picked up in that review work that we're doing at the moment. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'd certainly welcome the attendance of that group at the board. So if those details could be passed to me, I'll make sure that invitation is extended to them. And secondly, thank you very much. We will certainly get that SAR report to you, and any thoughts and observations you have on that would be very well received. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Sharon, can I ask Rob? I think you've got a question.
Yeah, so I just want to say thank you, Jim, for the report. Very easy to read, very accessible. I was just going to mention, Leader, if you're the organisation, you asked about organisation abuse. Generally, that would be linked to providers who provide care. It's if there are issues that have been reported around dehydration or people, residents being hungry, poor standards of care, lack of adequate procedures within the care setting. So that I would anticipate those two would be kind of in that space. I don't have the details of that. And then just one thing I think for the future is going to be interesting to look at the trends. And so looking at the reasons for abuse, I don't have the trend data for Thurrock, but where I was previously the last number of years, I saw financial abuse increasing. And it'd be interesting to see whether that becomes is reflected here as well. So it'd be interesting next year to look at possibly doing a little bit of trend analysis. I mean, I know it is the two key areas, as the leader mentioned. Actually, they're both the neglect. It's the neglect and the self-neglect. And it probably doesn't quite therefore bring forward the profile of financial abuse, physical abuse, which are also really significant issues when you look at them. So it'd be interesting to look at that trend data as we go forward. But thank you for the report. I think it's good.
I wonder if I might add to that the board also conduct unannounced visits to care homes, which have always, with very few exceptions, been very positive, and I think the staff have welcomed that reassurance as well. And the other point I'd like to make is I'm very grateful for your generous comments about the report, but the report that you'll get next time will be different from this because it'll be far more dynamic and it'll be informed with much greater data, which provides all that trend analysis and everything. It really is a remarkable. The Power BI model with the dashboard that's been developed with it has transformed the way we're working, and it's really exciting stuff, and we're very pleased. And I'll be very proud to come back to this group and brag. So.
I'd just like to ask questions about sexual abuse in terms of collecting any data. I'm not aware that the council collect very much data around sexual abuse for adults or children. Do the Guarding Board collect that type of data? And I know it's becoming quite a political subject. So I think Yvette Cooper's talking about local authorities. All sexual abuse needs to be reported to local authorities and they will be the keeper of data. So I just wondered if you've got a kind of starting point on that.
Well, the primary source for information on that is the police, and that's reported into the board in any case. But the authority as well, obviously through the CSP and other people, that is reported in as well. I can provide you with the figures on that if that would be of interest.
Thank you, and I'd be interested if it could be included in your report next year because I think it's a political hot topic at the moment. Are there any other questions? Could I move to the recommendation then? So it is recommended that members note the content of the report. Noted. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jim, for your report. Very, very helpful. Thank you. Right, if I can move on to item 9. So this is a highlight report agreed in November, sort of like coming back to kind of people taking responsibility for particular areas within the health and wellbeing strategy. Yes. So we've got 3 reports on page 149. We have 30 minutes for this item, so about 10 minutes each. And then maybe have like 5 minutes of questions afterwards. So Sharon, can I ask you to present the work on the health progress report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So by way of an update to this meeting, what you have in your papers are some proposed terms of reference for the Work and Health Programme Board that the Health and Wellbeing Board agreed at the last meeting you wish to establish as a subgroup. So I'm not going to go through the terms of reference in any detail. They are in your papers and you will have had a chance to review them. So I'm really looking here, Chair, for any feedback on the proposed terms of reference, whether you think the purpose, the duties and responsibilities of the new programme board are sufficient, or whether there are any additional areas that you would like to include. But I'm particularly interested, Chair, on feedback regarding membership. So as you can see, there are some suggested members of the programme board here, but lots of gaps and lots of question marks. So really seeking members of the Health and Wellbeing Board steer as to who you feel should be members of the board, or indeed any suggestions for agencies or individuals that I can reach out to after this meeting for a discussion around the work of the new Work and Health Programme Board and how people may choose to be engaged. So I'll open it up for comments and questions, Chair.
Any comments, suggestions? Mark, do you have a view at all?
I guess it's just thinking about the kind of economic development happening in Thurrock and the free ports, and there's so much, you know, the Thames crossing, there's so much economic development happening. I guess I was just thinking about how that is kind of coordinated and inputted into the group.
Good question, but I'll refer to Gloria, my colleague, who's probably more able to answer that one.
Thank you. So I've been working with Sharon on this, and I'm on there as part of the group. So I'm the kind of conduit, working with all the various aspects as you've just mentioned, because, you know, we've got devolution and various other agendas that will be coming and merging quite quickly. So it's going to be really important that all the different emerging changes that occur is factored in here. And one of the thing for me that remains unchangeable is place. So how are we defining Thurrock as a place that meets the needs of residents and businesses and particularly small medium enterprises, and making sure that those voices are heard irrespective of what happens. So there'll be things that are happening in terms of economic and priorities, etc. But i.e., what are the outcomes that are going to be achieved as part of this? It's going to be really, really important. So I will be feeding into that group, and as and when we develop, there may be other businesses that we may need to engage to be part of that group. So we'll look at that as well.
Councillor Kent?
I'm happy with that, but I'm just still got a kind of concern about the involvement of the Freeport. As you and I have discussed in the past, Freeport will create an awful lot of jobs. We need to be making sure that we get people job ready, and that's not just about hard skills and qualifications. Very often it's about the soft skills. It's about the kind of people's mentality, people's ability to kind of get up in the morning and go out and get a job. And we know that if people haven't worked for 2 years, the chances are they'll never work again. And we have an awful lot of economic inactivity in Thurrock. So I'm not necessarily suggesting that we get somebody from the Freeport to sit on this board. I'm quite happy for Gloria to act as the conduit, but there's, you know, more than one way of doing these things. And I would, you know, hope that the Freeport is a regular attender and that this board will kind of help to hold them to account for what they're doing to get people job ready and make sure that those people who need the jobs are getting them.
Margaret, do you have any thoughts?
Yes, thank you. I've just been looking through the terms of reference again, and I appreciate it is a terms of reference and it's not, you know, a larger document. But I'm not really very clear on what you might be asking from health. So I'm just sitting here thinking about primary care and what they may be able to do, what they may be able to input and engage with around this. And it may not be this particular board, I appreciate that, Sharon. It could be one of the work streams, but it just wasn't very clear to me.
So it's a really good question, Margaret, and I have had some conversations with a number of our local GPs and with the PCNs as well. I think it's fair to say that one of their concerns is that they have patients referred to them, usually from Job Centre Plus, who have gone in for their regular interview, as they need to have as part of having their continued benefits. They've been referred into their GP, and other than writing a fit note, it's very difficult for the GP to know what else to be able to do to support those individuals. So I think that I've identified as a particular issue for us. We do need to think about how we can better support both our GPs, but also better support Job Centre Plus as well as those patients who were caught up in that system. Obviously, this board can't do anything about national benefit changes and the way benefit entitlements work, etc. But I think locally there is an opportunity for the board to be able to work better as a system to identify where there are those particular issues and then look to see how we can provide the right level of support. So there are two particular areas that, if they're not clearly reflected in the terms of reference, can look at how we more clearly represent that. One, I think, is how we tackle the fit note issue. And the other is how we support our small to medium-sized businesses. So I think some of our very large businesses, quite often they have occupational health departments. They have quite a lot of support already, whereas our small to medium-sized businesses don't. And they haven't necessarily got the right policies or protocols or capacity to be able to support those people who are currently in work but have long-term health conditions, who are on the cusp of having to leave work and enter into the benefit system. Or I think we touched last time, Rob, on people who might have disabilities. So these are two areas that have been identified already that this board needs to be mindful of, and that I think probably working as a local system, this board will have an opportunity to be able to influence and take forward both of those issues locally, when there'll be other issues that will be much more challenging for us to take forward locally. But those are two areas. And then I think I'm not that close personally to the Connect to Work programme, but that, my understanding, is very much Essex County Council led. We also need to be sure that this board is holding our colleagues in Essex County Council who are leading on the Connect to Work programme. The board needs to hold them to account for what that programme is delivering for Thurrock residents as well. So I would see those as being three particular areas that we need to focus on, but very happy, Chair, to look at how we can tweak the terms of reference to more clearly show that.
Okay. So, if agreeable, I'll move on to housing. So, Gloria.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. The report I've done here is really light touch, really. It's just to talk about the two key strategies that impact on health and well-being that's emerging at the moment. One is in relation to the housing strategy, which we've already got and adopted as a council, 2022 to 2027. And the other is the emerging homelessness strategy, homelessness prevention and rough sleeping strategy, which is due to go to Cabinet for consideration in March. And the aim here of this highlight report is just to reflect how housing impacts on health and well-being. So it just captures some of the key domains of health, and therefore how housing is inextricably linked to those. So on the homelessness prevention strategy, as an example, if you look at the staying healthier for longer, we talk about affordable housing supply and tenancy sustainment programs as key to integrating to that priority. On community safety, for example, stable housing for vulnerable cohorts is absolutely key in reducing risk to individuals who are experiencing homelessness. And really about collaborative ways of working, so collaborative safety measures, working in partnership to address homelessness and enhancing overall community security. So it's just very, very important across all of these things. It's partnership working and working with a range of partners to ensure that when we're delivering health and well-being, that you know, an individual having somewhere to live to a good standard is absolutely key. On the housing strategy side, again, we've already got this strategy in place, and we recognise very much about integrated housing services is absolutely important to personal-led health and care. So again, it's just really drawing on some of the outcomes of health and well-being and how housing contributes to that. So the two strategies will be the homelessness prevention and rough sleeping strategy is a statutory document we must have, and as a strategy it will address a range of challenges. From temporary accommodation is something that is really high on the agenda at the moment with the council. We experience the need for providing temporary accommodation, not just for our own residents, but residents coming in to the borough, which puts pressure on housing. So we're looking at ways of how we address that by increasing supply of housing to be able to accommodate that, thereby reducing the costs of putting people in hotels as an example. So it's a big challenge, not just for the council, but for all the partners in Thurrock. I think this is one example of how we need to work collaboratively and ensure that when we're talking about housing, we're looking at it from a wide range of lens and not just housing and bricks and mortar. And I think really, so I say, it's just demonstrating how health and well-being and housing are inextricably linked. So I'm happy to take any questions.
So, do members have any questions? No? Margaret.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Gloria. I'm just wondering how this synchronises with the local plan. Having just heard you say we're not talking about bricks and mortar, particularly.
I mean, the local plan is obviously is not my area, but I guess in terms of when we're talking about development and where development happens, I mean, everyone's aware that the council is working towards a local plan and we haven't got a local plan in place. However, that does not preclude the council from considering development in the area. That does not stop. So planning applications still come in. The council considers it in the light of what it's got at the moment. So development doesn't stop. It just means that the manner, that the pace on developing that local plan is going in one hand, and then planning applications are still being considered on sites that are viable and ready for development. And it's really important to state that, you know, the council, as I understand it, is open for business. We are speaking to developers, we are speaking to suppliers, we are speaking to, more importantly, small to medium businesses, developers who are keen to come and work with the council and increase supply. And we are considering, you know, different ways of increasing supply, whether that is from your traditional build to modular. So we are really working hard with developers, and I emphasise again the small medium ones as well, because we're very keen on working with those businesses that don't ordinarily have that traction in the same way as the big developers do, so that we are really keeping our options open, if that makes sense. Okay.
Any other questions? I mean, I think housing is such a massive issue at the moment. It's the biggest strain on the council at the moment is homelessness. I think we, as councils, need to be very creative in working with developers about how we can provide the housing stock we actually need. I'm a big fan of developing council housing myself. We've lost 18,000 council houses since 1981. We've only got 10,000, we had 28,000 and the population has grown. So I think we also need to look at our private sector and the quality of our private sector housing, which actually has a dramatic effect on people's health. So these are all areas I'm pleased that we're looking at. So thank you. Right, if I can move on to domain number 6, which is air quality. So if I just ask Mike to give some feedback on where we are with that at the moment.
Thank you, Chair. As many may know, in councillor positions, I've taken this paper now to Cabinet and overview scrutiny, the air quality strategy. We have signed up for the Essex-wide air quality strategy. That is currently out for consultation at the moment. So I encourage everyone to visit the web page there at Essex County Council, who are leading for everyone involved. In terms of our own strategy, as I've explained in previous committees and boards, we'll continue to develop our own. It is important for Thurrock to have its own individual strategy. However, as expressed in those committees and boards that I've been to, air quality is naturally all around us and is affected by our neighbours. So working alongside Essex County Council and stretching across to Southend City Council, only positive things can come from that kind of collaboration. In terms of our air quality strategy, I said at the last meeting that we will continue to develop it, and we will. That is currently being conducted by our air quality officer, and I hope to be able to bring a strategy, the independent Thurrock strategy, to this board in the future months as well. In terms of Domain 6, it's also community safety partnership work and the community safety aspects of my role. Again, I report to the Community Safety Partnership as its chair, and we report into the Place and Overview Scrutiny Committee. I don't mind admitting, Chair, it's a little complicated as to what it is that I am to present to this board in terms of the CSP, because we have such a detailed annual report. We have our priorities, and we already refer, as I say, to overview and scrutiny around that. However, I am open to any questions that you may have. However, the team are seeing reductions in crime. However, we as a board have acknowledged that we believe the perception of crime is going up. So that is a worrying trend for us, in that people are under-reporting matters such as ASB and lower level crime. And that's something that the CSP is trying to work on as well, because that does affect, as we heard earlier, the safety concerns of people does affect their well-being. But I'm happy to take any questions.
So, open to members. Any questions? No? Well, I really welcome the air strategy in partnership with Essex. That's really good news. Thurrock has some of the worst air quality in the country. I am deeply worried about the impact it has on our health, particularly children's health. I'm hoping that partnership will help contribute to improving that, but I'm also looking forward to, with so much more industry and housing coming to the area, how we actually manage that air quality that we can actually control. I know we can't control everything. So I'd really like to keep this on the agenda, because I know that we have one of the highest sort of like health issues for children in terms of breathing and asthma in the country. And I think it's got a lot to do with our air quality. So I want to keep that really alive. And maybe we could just have a chat about broadening down the brief around the kind of antisocial crime behaviour. I'll maybe we could catch up with you later on that.
Yeah, certainly, Chair. Like I say, I don't want to waste the board's time. It is precious. And obviously the CSP already going to the overview and scrutiny. I welcome the air quality remaining on the agenda for obvious reasons, and look forward to bringing the strategy to you.
Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Chair. May I ask about car idling, how that is going? Has there been any improvement with that, particularly outside schools where people keep their engines running?
I do believe there's a task and finish group around school parking issues. It's picked up idling. I can't say it's unfortunate, but the way the legislation works is that someone that is currently idling would have to be approached and asked to stop, to turn off their engine. If they do, then no enforcement's taken. So I am pleased to say whenever anyone has been challenged in this borough, they have turned off their engine. No one has been obnoxious or anything like that and kept their engine on. However, it's therefore difficult to then come back to with any form of data around how many instances that's taken place. I'm looking to change that so that just approaches could be recorded for a period of time, and hopefully that will help the task and finish group.
Okay, unless there's any other questions. Oh, sorry, Rob.
Thank you. Can I just go back to Gloria's update on the housing strategy and provide the board with assurance that we continue to strive to work ever closer as one council and not across directorates? So really useful update, Gloria. Thank you for that. But can I just take us back to earlier at the beginning of the meeting, the commissioning strategy? So to provide reassurance to board members that if you're looking through our commissioning strategy, there is talk about how we're going, there is a section about how we're going to be looking at supported accommodation and accommodation for vulnerable adult groups, and how housing is so critical to work with on that. And just to provide board with assurance that we link really closely across the council departments and actually with health colleagues as well around the whole of the accommodation agenda.
Thank you for that, Rob. Right, so if I can just move to the recommendations. The board is asked to note the comments upon the updates. I noted. Okay, so I'd just like to thank everyone for coming today. I'd just like to thank Darren. This is Darren's last meeting of the Health Board. I've been working with Thurrock for 8 years. Be leaving us in March, as I say, this is your last meeting. So thank you very much for all your hard work in preparation for our Health Board meeting. So many, many thanks. Thank you. With that, I'd like to draw the meeting to a close at 3:43.